every Indian must be attentive to what's happening in Bihar. This is the laboratory of what's going to happen in the rest of the country. And this is a serious undermining of the universal adult franchise. So this is not just about Bihar. This is not just about any technicality of voters list. This is about the principle of universal adult franchise being undermined in a way which is diabolic.
And I'll just sum up that point you made by underlining and repeating for the audience that the total number of people who will be excluded, i.e. not included in the electoral rolls of Bihar, is not 65 lakh as the Election Commission has claimed, but more than 94 lakhs. And depending upon what happens thereafter, you fear that that number could go up to 150 lakhs, i.e. 15 million. That is the enormity of the situation.
That's true.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. How should we read the stand the Supreme Court has taken on the special intensive revision of the electoral rolls in Bihar? Does it suggest a determination to act or a willingness to tarry and delay? Is the total number of names that won't appear on the electoral roll 65 lakhs, or could they be considerably greater? And what sort of questions does that raise? Those are the key issues I shall put today to someone who's taken a strong and forthright stand on the issue, the National Convener of the Bharat Jodo Abhiyan, Yogendra Yadav. Yogendra Yadav, let's start with the Supreme Court. It's refused to stay the special intensive revision, but it has suggested that if necessary, it will be prepared to quash the outcome of the SIR at a later point. It's even suggested it could act if 15 people who have been wrongly declared dead are produced in court. So let me start by asking, how do you read the Supreme Court's position?
Karan, it's hard at this stage to say what Supreme Court's position is. From the observations that the judges have made, a couple of things are very clear. Number one, they have said this should be an exercise in mass inclusion, not in mass exclusion. That should be the North Pole or the guiding star for what the Supreme Court is saying. And if that is the case, one can only feel grateful and happy that this is the case. The court has also said, don't worry, even if we are not staying the publication of the draft electoral rolls on the 1st of August, come to us with evidence. Even if you can show 15 people who are dead, who are not dead, have been declared dead, come to us. We will look at it. And has also said, if the exercise goes against the Constitution, don't worry, we'll scrap it all. So while it has not granted a stay on the publication of draft electoral rolls, it has given strong indications that the rolls must conform to principles of inclusion, principles of universal adult franchise. And my own sense is that those principles already stand violated.
Now, those are, I suppose, in a sense, grounds for some feeling of optimism. But on the other hand, the Supreme Court has not set an early date for the hearing. It will only happen on the 12th and 13th of August. Is there a sense in which the Supreme Court is kicking the SIR can into the long grass? Is it showing signs that it's not in a great hurry to hear this case or come to a decision?
This was an apprehension, Karan, and as a matter of fact, the Election Commission actually wanted the case to be heard after the entire rolls are finalized, which is on 25th of September. Thankfully, the court did not agree to that. And 12th of August, although it is 12 days later than the draft electoral rolls, but it is not as late as to make it infructuous, because there are times then when you get a date, which is irrelevant because by then it's fait accompli. Fortunately, the hearing is taking place much before it becomes fait accompli, though I would still feel it is later than one should have had it.
Now, the Supreme Court has also reiterated what it said on the 10th of July, that Aadhaar cards and voter cards should be permitted. The court says they have what the court calls a presumption of genuineness. On the other hand, the Election Commission has already said no once. We don't know what it will say the second time, but it certainly hasn't said yes as yet either. So what do you make of this reiteration by the Supreme Court?
That's a very clear and strong indication, Karan, because the Election Commission has taken a very deliberately ambiguous position as far as Aadhaar card is concerned. On ration card, the Election Commission clearly says we won't go by it because it's subject to fraudulence. Incidentally, you must have noticed that the documents that the Election Commission is very happy to accept are no less subject to fraudulence. The nation has seen in the last 1 week the Awas Praman Patra, which is a residence certificate being issued to a dog and later to a tractor. So but anyway, Election Commission says that's all right, but ration cards are not. On Epic card, Election Commission says, all right, we are using Epic in any case for reaching the voters. So it's an ambiguous position. They don't say we don't recognize Epic altogether, but they do not say it's a decisive proof either. On Aadhaar, it's a very deliberately ambiguous position that the ECI has taken. ECI says, look, we are not ruling out Aadhaar because after the admonition last time from the Supreme Court, the ECI cannot say Aadhaar is useless. So they say, we already have a provision for recording of Aadhaar, but as you would have noticed, that provision for recording of Aadhaar in the enumeration form is optional. It's not compulsory. The Supreme Court asked them, why don't you take Aadhaar into account? The Election Commission says, well, it is one of the documents we are taking into account, although Aadhaar is not necessarily the final proof of citizenship. The court asked them, so is any of the remaining 11 documents a final proof of citizenship? Of course it's not. So that ambiguity needs to be sorted out. It will come up before the court.
But that means that the ambiguity of the position taken by the Election Commission will continue till at least the 12th and 13th of August. As yet, this direction from the Supreme Court, please consider Aadhaar, please consider voter cards, has not been willingly and fully accepted by the ECI. It remains ambiguous till the 12th, 13th of August.
Yes, 2 or 3 kinds of damages will continue till the 12th of August. One, as you mentioned, no one in Bihar knows whether I can go to the election authorities when asked for submission of document, because as you know, tomorrow, 1st of August, when the draft electoral rolls are issued, after that begins the process of submission of documents. Till the 12th of August, or maybe till the judgment comes, no one in Bihar knows, can I go just with my Aadhaar card and say, thank you very much, here is my document? No one knows. Person does not know it, the Electoral Commission does not know it, the BLO does not know it, the ERO does not know it. So yes, that's a damage. But the bigger damage that we have till at least the judgment comes out is this, Karan, and I really was very sad that this was not adequately taken into account, that the 65 lakh voters who have already been dropped from the electoral rolls, these are 65 lakh people who figured on the voters list on the 24th of June, the day Election Commission announced SIR. These 65 lakh people will not figure on the electoral rolls which are to be issued tomorrow. And I'm not making a forecast. I'm simply saying this is exactly what the Election Commission's legal position is. These 65 lakh people will not enjoy any legal right, even of hearing Now, the standard procedure in our country so far, Karan, has been that if your name is on the voters list and tomorrow they want to delete, for example, my name from the voters list, they have to give me a notice. They have to give me a personal hearing. And if the verdict is adverse, then I have a first right to appeal. And then there is a second appeal that I can file. These 65 lakh people will not have any of these rights. Now, you might wonder why. These people were on the voters list. Their names are being dropped. Why should they not be entitled to this basic legal recourse? The very funny, strange, too clever by half answer by the Election Commission is these names have never been deleted. Look, there was an earlier voters list. That entire voter list has been scrapped. This is a de novo voters list. And if your name doesn't happen to be there, that's all right. Stand on the queue, come in as an ordinary voter once again. You want to enroll yourself, we are open to enrolling yourself, but your name has not been deleted. That, unfortunately, is a very serious consequence for 65 lakh people who a BLO has decided are dead or are permanently away or are untraceable, and therefore their names are dropped from the draft list. And any right to appeal and hearing and notice is available only to those who are on the draft electoral rolls. So they do not have even these basic rights. I really wish the court had taken notice of this very critical loss of legal rights for 65 lakh people.
I'll just underline for the audience what you said because I think it's critically important. That on the grounds that these 65 were never on the voters list because this is a de novo, brand new voters list being created, therefore the names have not been deleted, therefore they don't have the right to appeal. That sounds like a technical sleight of hand. But actually, the situation is worse because the number may not be 65 lakhs. It could be potentially up to 94 lakhs. And that is the great finding of the article you've written for the Indian Express published by the paper today. You've revealed something very important, and I want to turn to that now. You say that the percentage of the adult population in Bihar that was on the electoral rolls before the special intensive revision was 97%. But the percentage that will now be on the electoral rolls will fall to 88%. This means that the number of people whose name will not be on the electoral roll is not 65 lakhs, as the Election Commission has said, but almost 94 lakhs. For those who haven't read your article, could you explain how you come to this terrifying conclusion?
Thanks, Karan, for simplifying the headlines of what we have said. Yes, this is terrifying. Yes, this is a very important thing for everyone to take note of. Now, let's start. Let's not get into technicality. Let me state the basic argument. The Election Commission is saying, look, Bihar's voter list were inflated. There were too many people's names who should not have been there, dead, outsiders, permanently away, duplicates, and so on. And we've just cleaned it. What's your problem? How do you respond to an argument like this? One response can be to say, okay, look at this name, the person is not dead, why have you declared him dead, etc. All that will begin from tomorrow onwards. But is there an independent way of us being able to assess whether a voter list in one particular state, in a region or a country is adequate or not? Fortunately, there is a global pattern to this. There is a global standard method to assessing that. And that method is what is called the EP ratio. But forget the technicalities. The basic intuition is very simple. How many adult persons do you have in Bihar today? If we have an independent estimate of that, then we can put the voters list against that and say, does it more or less cover that? Fortunately for us, we do have an independent estimate of the number of adult population of Bihar. And that estimate comes not from me, not from some unofficial source, not from some research paper, but from Government of India's own expert group. This is the official report used by every government officials, every government department. These are projections made of population of each state by each age category. So we have an independent estimate. And incidentally, this is used not only by many other departments. This is done by Ministry of Health. This is used even by the Election Commission itself. Here is the report of the month of January, where the Election Commission is using population estimates to assess its own quality. So it's not just me. Election Commission also believes that this is a reasonable way of assessing the quality of its own estimates. So we go by that. So the simple question is, how many adult persons were in Bihar in the month of July 2025, this month that is just passing by? The answer is 8 crore 18 lakh people. So an ideal list, and incidentally, Karan, it should be remembered that census estimates, census projections are not subject to errors on ground of death, because that's precisely what they take into account. It is also not prone to errors on account of migration, largely because census does not say how many members do you have in your family. The census says on the night of 28th of February, how many people were or how many people are in your household. That's all. So if your son is working in Punjab, he will be calculated in Punjab, not in Bihar. So it's not subject to all those errors. As per all those estimates, 8 crore 18 lakh persons adults are living in Bihar in the month of July 2025. So an ideal voter list of Bihar should have 8 crore 18 lakh persons. How many did we have? In the month of June, we had 7 crore 89 lakh people. A little less than required, but reasonably okay. What would it be like if the SIR is implemented as per the press release of the Election Commission of India? It will drop to 7 crore 24 lakhs only. So while what the revision exercise should have done was to go from about 7 crore 89 lakhs upwards towards 8 crore 18 lakhs, it is actually, instead of going up, they've taken a reverse direction and they are bringing it down to 7 crore 24 lakhs, and they're asking you to celebrate it. That's the odd thing about it. The technical point about EP ratio is simply this. EP ratio is the total number of persons on electoral rolls. Electors, we roughly call them voters, but these are electors technically. Electors as a proportion to total adult population. India actually has had a fairly robust picture on that. The article also gives you an all India statistics. In year 2024, India's overall EP ratio was 99%, which is fairly robust. If there are 100 adult persons, the list had 99 persons. So that's quite good. Bihar was slightly behind, not ahead, but behind. Remember, Bihar's list was not inflated. It was deflated to begin with. Bihar was 97%, a little behind the national average. So technically 3% names should have been added, ideally, in Bihar's list. With the implementation of SIR, it drops to 88%, which is 7.24 divided by 8.18 crore. This is shocking. This is utterly shocking, Karan. Never in the history of India has this kind of a chopping taken place. Never has any state of India, in my understanding, reached anywhere below 90% of EP ratio. And this could well be the biggest disenfranchisement in the world in the 21st century.
In fact, this is what you write in your article published by the Express today. What's happened in Bihar, you say, is the biggest single act of disenfranchisement in the history of independent India, and perhaps in the history of any country in the 21st century. And for the sake of the audience, I'll just remind them how large the potential disenfranchisement is. On June the 24th, 2025, a day before the special intensive revision began in Bihar, the percentage of the adult population of Bihar that was on the electoral rolls of Bihar was 97%. Now, at the end of the draft rolls being created, the percentage has fallen from 97 to 88%. In other words, the percentage has fallen by 9%. And this is why you say it is the biggest single act of disenfranchisement in the history of independent India. and perhaps in the history of any country in the 21st century. This is huge, Yogendra Yadav. This is not just a mere technical detail. This is massive.
Absolutely. And this flies in the face of what the Supreme Court has said. Supreme Court has clearly said it should be an exercise in mass inclusion, not in mass exclusion. Now, as you can see, if 94 lakh people who should have been on the rolls are not on the rolls, and till a month ago, at least 70 lakh of them were on the rolls. If this happens in one stroke, what else is mass exclusion? And Karan, I use the word perhaps in the case of international global standards because we don't exactly know the situation in each country of the world, and mass exclusions are very systematically hidden. But I cannot imagine a place other than 19th century US, the US in the 19th century, when southern states had systematically disenfranchised the blacks after the Civil War. I honestly think it would be hard to find a parallel anywhere in the world of something like, 9 million people being disenfranchised. So this is huge.
Yogendra Yadav, it's even worse. You have told me conversationally that the figure of 94 lakhs is established on the basis of what's called the provisional draft rolls, the draft electoral rolls. Therefore, this figure of 94 lakhs is a provisional figure because it's based on the draft electoral rolls. You believe in the final tally, the figure of 94 lakhs could go up for several reasons. Can you share with the audience what those reasons are? I gather there are 3 reasons why you believe the figure could go up.
Exactly. And these are not just my apprehensions. This is exactly as per the rules of the Election Commission. According to the rules of the SIR, once you file this enrollment form, every BLO has to either recommend or not recommend. So BLO can say, provisionally, I find this form satisfying. He should be granted voter right. Or the BLO can say, well, I don't think this person quite qualifies. Now, that's first step of exclusion. Mind you, this is beyond the 94 lakhs that we talk about. Already this much exclusion has taken place, will take place tomorrow morning. Beyond that, there can be a substantial number. The initial figures that I'm getting from, because 2 or 3 districts have released these figures, I have the figures from the district of Darbhanga and Kaimur. And it already shows that about 10 to 12% cases have been marked for deletion, which is to say where BLO has said not recommended. Now, that does not mean permanent exclusion. Yes, they will have the right to notice, hearing, etc., etc. But provisionally, they have been marked for deletion, 10 to 12% cases. And 10 to 12% in this instance, Karan, would mean 10% would mean 72 lakh additional people. This is over and above the 94 that we've already spoken. That's the first reason. Second, all these 7 crore 24 lakh people would be required to give certificates. In many cases, they can only show 2003 electoral rolls and get away with it. The numbers is much smaller than what they initially claimed. I believe about 2 crore of them will get away by simply showing the electoral roll of 2003. In the remaining about 5 crore people, they are required to produce certificates, documents, one of those 11 documents in the course of the next month. Obviously, many of them would fail to produce those documents. And if they fail, then that's the second reason for exclusion. The ERO can say, sorry, we got your form, but you failed to produce any certificates, any documents. And in my opinion, this is not enough. So failure to produce document is a ground. And third, there is also a special provision. The ERO, the person concerned, the person in charge of electoral rolls, normally the BDO of that area, that person can make local inquiry. And on the basis of local inquiry, decide that you actually, your claim is wrong. So even for the 7.24 crore people who have filled the forms, who are provisionally potentially eligible to be on the voters list, you can still be thrown out, A, because the BLO said you are a suspect case, B, because your documents were not found in order or were not there, and C, because the ERO can make local inquiry and to his satisfaction, decide that you do not belong there. So we are looking at substantial chunk over and above the 94 lakhs that we are talking about. That's why our apprehension.
In fact, that figure of 94 lakhs could quite easily cross 1 crore and go further higher as well.
My own sense, honestly, is since the Supreme Court mentioned the figure of 15, the judges said, Justice Suryakant said, well, if you get even 15 people who are dead, who have been declared dead and who are not dead, come to us. My own sense is at the end of it, we should have at least 15 million cases. 15 million cases of persons who deserve to be on the voters list, but who have been thrown out. This is the scale that we are talking about. And Karan, let's not forget to remind our viewers, Bihar happens to be only the first state where this exercise is to begin. It is an all India order. Election Commission has given orders for implementation of SIR throughout the country. In Manipur, preparations have started. Yesterday, my colleagues called and said Rajasthan workshops have started. It is happening. And of course, Bengal and Assam would be the next target. So this is an all India exercise. And if we keep ourselves to the very minimalist estimate, which is to say, all right, Bihar already had 97%. Let's not talk of 100%. All right, they were 97. And because of SIR, they have dropped by 9 percentage points. We don't know whether further exclusions will take place. That's your apprehension. Forget about it, etc. Even if we stick to just that 9% figure, that wherever SIR is carried out, it may lead to something like 9% exclusion. In that case, Karan, we are speaking about 9 crore voters being thrown out of India's voters list, because it so happens that as of today, the number on our voters list is almost exactly 100 crore. We are a nation of 143 crores, and our voters list is almost exactly 100 crore today. 9% being dropped is 9 crore, 90 million people being disenfranchised. This should be a global news of the highest order.
I'll just point out to the audience that 90 million is 130 or 135% the population of Britain, is greater than the population of France. And what we are saying is an entire country worth of people will have been dropped, if we put it in those terms. But I'll underline one other thing for you. At the moment, on the basis of the draft electoral rolls, you believe that something like 94 lakh people who should be included will not be included. But after the final tally comes in, that figure of 94 lakhs you believe can go up to 15 million, which means 150 lakh. In other words, it will go up by something like possibly 60%. That is the size and scale of the problem. Let me come to something else that you pointed out in that article for the Express, which hasn't got the attention it deserves. You write, the Election Commission of India has not reported a single case of addition during the special intensive review. In other words, we only have the deletion of names. We do not have even one instance of new names being added.
I'm glad you noticed that, Karan, because this is astounding. What is a revision of voters list? A revision of voters list is to say, okay, here is a voters list. There can be errors. Errors obviously can be of two types. Names which are there but should not be there, and names that should be there and are not there. That's what revision is all about. Whether it's intensive or summary or whatever, every revision is to be this. Isn't it odd? This is the oddest possible thing that has happened in the history of independent India. I challenge everyone. Please show me one example in the history of independent India where we have done hundreds of revisions so far in the voters list. Please show me one instance where not one single vote was added. So these 1 lakh BLOs go around to all the places in Bihar. They scrutinized 8 crore people of Bihar. And then they find that at least 65 lakhs are worth throwing out according to their own admission. And they do not find one single soul they do not find one person in Bihar who should have been on the voters list but has not been on the voters list. Now, technically speaking, SIR exercise had a provision for that. SIR exercise said that in case you come across someone who should have been on the voters list but is not, but his name does not figure on the list, please carry a blank form. As you would recall, the SIR exercise was about taking partially pre-filled form. So someone came to your house with your EPIC number printed on it, with your earlier photograph printed on it, your name there. But in case you had someone in your house who did not figure in the previous list, the SIR said, please carry a blank form, hand over that blank form to the person, collect it and upload that. Now, according to the figures released by the Election Commission, not one single case falls in that category.
Which is bizarre.
How is that
Absolutely
possible?
bizarre.
I mean, if you do it in one mohalla of Bihar, you would find this. You hold it in 10 households of Bihar, you would find some person. So clearly, this was not an exercise in revision. This was an exercise in deletion and deletion and deletion. This was the only purpose.
You make that point very forcefully in your Indian Express article. You say, and I'm quoting you, the SIR was not an exercise in revision, but an exercise solely focused on deletion. And I'll repeat those critical words, solely focused on deletion. In other words, what the Election Commission was doing behind the disguise of this clever nomenclature, special intensive revision, is actually not revising, but deleting. That's what it was doing.
Can I add one more thing to that, Karan, which is not in the article? When the opposition delegation went to meet the Chief Election Commission, right in the beginning, and I have it from those who attended the meeting, they came back and they were shocked. They said as soon as the meeting began, the CEC, and this is, mind you, this meeting took place on the 2nd of July. It was less than a week at the beginning of the exercise. And by then, forms were not distributed because forms were not printed in most cases. All right. On 2nd of July, the Chief Election Commission of India told senior representatives of political parties, look, in Bihar, at least 20% names are fake. We'll have to throw them out. This is the opening gambit. The Chief Election Commission of India was convinced before the exercise began, before any data started coming, that there are 20% fake names on Bihar's list, and he was determined to throw them out. He has already managed to throw out about 9%. And my suspicion is that going by his own proclamation, another 10% are slated to be thrown out in the process of scrutiny and so on. Now, how does he know that 20% voters are excess in Bihar? That can be his personal impression. He's entitled to it. But has he not read his own reports about the number of adult population in Bihar? Has he not read his own report, as I showed you? These are Election Commission's own reports on relationship between elector and population. Now, Election Commission, the only difference between my approach and that of Election Commission is we are using the same set of data, the same figures. Election Commission looks at the number of electorate as a proportion of the entire population. I make it even more precise by looking at the population which is 18 and above, which is the only relevant population group. But has the Election Commissioner not looked at it? He should have been saying, look, Bihar is slightly behind the national average. I'm doing this exercise. And while we eliminate some wrong names, of course, we should eliminate people who are dead and duplicate and so on. But on balance, I expect the figures to go up because that's what my exercise says. That's what my own data says. Instead of that, he is already saying we'll throw out about 20% names. And the entire exercise was carried out in such a way that there was no question of anyone including a single additional names. What is this if not an exercise, predetermined exercise in mass disenfranchisement?
In the light of what you've said and revealed and opened the eyes of the audience to, let me go one step further and put to you briefly certain findings established by the Hindustan Times, because they, in a very real sense, round off what you've just been telling me. The paper says that based on the assumption that the total deletions are 65 lakhs and not 94 lakhs. The paper says that if 65 lakhs are deleted, the number of registered voters in Bihar will be fewer, and mark my words, fewer than what it was at the time of the 2024 national election, as well as the 2020 assembly elections. And of course, if the numbers deleted are 94 lakhs and not 65 lakhs, then the results will be even worse. And we're ending up with a situation where the size of the electoral register is shrinking below the 2020 mark.
Absolutely. The total number of voters in Bihar 5 years ago in 2020 election was 7.36 crore. By now, Election Commission has already brought it to 7.24 crores. Even if no further deletions take place, it's already below what it was 5 years ago. Now, clearly, the population of Bihar has grown. Clearly, some names deserve to be added. So yes, there are wrong entries. By all means, delete that. There are dead people, duplicates. By all means, delete that. But on balance, your numbers should go up, cannot come down. How weird is that? And I'm absolutely endorse what the Hindustan Times has said here, that this is astounding that after 5 years of growth, and Bihar continues to be one of those states of India where population growth rate is higher than the rest of the country. Now, after population growth, the electorate size has shrunk. How astonishing.
Well, in fact, on that particular point, the high fertility rate of Bihar, the Hindustan Times says that the number of adults, i.e. people over 18 who are eligible to vote, in Bihar increased by 28.5% between 2001 and 2011. Isn't it therefore not perplexing, but bewildering and inexplicable that in 2025 the number of registered voters should fall, not increase? The adult population is increasing. It's increasing by something like 28.5% in a 10-year period. But in 2025, the number of voters is shrinking, and shrinking possibly, as you pointed out, by 9%.
Absolutely. So this is another way of articulating the same point. And mind you, Karan, here the relevant birth rate is not that of 2025 or 24, because those infants are not entitled to vote. We are looking at what the birth rate was in 2002 to 2007. These are the people who should have entered the voters list now. It was high, and Hindustan Times again is very correct to note all that actually 28% increase has taken place in the population. Yes, some names may have been there which should not be there, deleted. It could also be that some dead person's name which should have been deleted have by simple complacence stayed on the list. By all means, delete that. But on balance, as Hindustan Times correctly notes, the number should go up. How can the numbers come down? I mean, this is astonishing. This is beyond anything. And I'm not, so I make a distinction here, Karan, between the difference between 94 lakhs and 65 lakhs is this. 65, or to be more precise, 69% people have been axed because of SIR. So that's disenfranchisement. Another 25 should have been added but have not been added. That's under-enfranchisement. So in all, we are looking at 94 to begin with. But my concern, Karan, today is not only that 94. My concern is what is to come in the days in the next 1 month. Because another round of deletions is about to take place, as I said, either because the BLO has already marked them as suspect, as not recommended, or because they do not have the papers that they may wish to give, or because the BLO or the ERO may not find them suitable. And my real fear, Karan, is that this may not be carried out evenly across Bihar. This would be carried out in ways which is discriminatory, which is to say, in some districts of Bihar, the screw would be tightened very strongly. In some districts of Bihar, everyone would be asked, produce your documents. Otherwise, how do I know you are an Indian citizen?
Well,
in other districts of Bihar, it won't be the case.
Can I interrupt and say what you're hinting at? I'm making it explicit The people who will be disproportionately not included in the electoral rolls will be people who come from minority communities, by which I mean mainly Bihari Muslims.
That's a very strong apprehension. The SIR order by itself did not contain anything which could be called discriminatory on the basis of community. However, the excess, and we do not as yet know because we don't have names and so on. This I would be able to confirm only 3-4 days later, whether in the list, so the deletion so far in the under inclusion of 94 lakhs so far, has there been over exclusion of Muslims or not? We do not know yet. But the real apprehension is people who have been marked as not recommended by BLO, or people who may be now asked to provide certificates, documents that the commission knows they don't have. And this is not just Muslims, everyone doesn't have it. But the trouble is, if it's Karan, you say, all right, you don't need to give certificate. You look all right, you look very Indian. But if you're Kamran, then why don't you give me certificates? This is what the apprehension is. And specifically in 4 districts of Bihar, which lie to the northeast of Bihar. These are Kishanganj, Purnia, Katihar, and Araria, which is called Simanchal, an area which has a very significant Muslim population, an area which is close to, proximate to Bangladesh and to Nepal, and where the BJP leaders have been openly saying, Election Commission hasn't said it, but the BJP leaders have been saying that this is an area where many names need to be deleted. So we need to keep an eye on whether there is greater exclusion of these areas compared to the rest.
I laughed because that example that you took between Karan and Kamran was so true, so true. But actually, this is not a laughing matter. This is deeply tragic, and it is a horrible stain on our democracy. And I'll point out one other fact. The Hindustan Times also shows that at every election since 1977, that's almost 50 years, the number of registered voters has increased every single time, with the exception of the two assembly elections of 2005, where there were specific reasons why it came down marginally. But those 2 elections apart, the number of voters has gone up at every election since 1977. This will be the first time since 2005 that the number of voters at an assembly election will shrink, not go up. And by the way, the percentage with which it shrinks will be even greater if the numbers not included are 94 lakhs, not 65 lakhs. That is the enormity of the situation we face. And I applaud you for raising it so starkly and so clearly in the article you wrote. One last question before I end. You've already pointed out that if a Bihar-style SIR is carried out nationwide, and if the deletions are only similar to what you've identified in the draft electoral roll of Bihar, we're talking of 9% of the country's total voters being deleted. We're talking about 90 million people being deleted, which I said is 130 to 135% of the population of Britain, considerably more than the entire population of France. That is the size of the problem that stares us in the face if this exercise is carried out nationwide.
Absolutely. And that's why every Indian must be attentive to what's happening in Bihar. This is the laboratory of what's going to happen in the rest of the country. And this is a serious undermining of the universal adult franchise. When the principle of universal adult franchise was accepted, this was not just a constitutional principle. Under the guidance of Sukumar Sen, the great first election commissioner of India, from whom all these fellows should learn something or two, this was operationalized by following 2 principles. Number 1, by saying voters will not be responsible for getting their names on the electoral rolls. State will be responsible for putting their names. And number 2, there would be a presumption that you are an Indian citizen unless there is an evidence to the contrary. No documents will be asked. These 2 things enabled India's electoral rolls to realize the principle of universal adult franchise. And that universality is being seriously eroded today. So this is not just about Bihar. This is not just about any technicality of voters list. This is about the principle of universal adult franchise being undermined in a way which is diabolic.
And I'll just sum up that point you made by underlining and repeating for the audience that the total number of people who will be excluded, i.e. not included in the electoral rolls of Bihar, is not 65 lakh as the Election Commission has claimed, but more than 94 lakhs. And depending upon what happens thereafter, you fear that that number could go up to 150 lakhs, i.e. 15 million. That is the enormity of the situation. Yogendra Yadav.
That's true.
Yogendra Yadav, thank you very much for the interview. And in particular, thank you very much for opening our eyes to the enormity of the problem, far, far greater than what anyone had actually up till now realized it was. I am deeply grateful. Take care. Stay well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.